In this video, we're going to talk about Chapter 11, Controls for Information Security. In particular, we're going to focus on preventive, detective, and corrective controls. All right, so let's jump right into those controls. And I am going to remind you, hold on one second. There you go. All right, so we want to look at how to mitigate the risk of attack. And once again, we're going to use a combination of preventive, detective, and corrective controls. So let's look at each one of them on this slide, and then we'll get into more detail. Our preventive controls are measures implemented to prevent an incident or breach from occurring. Those controls aim to deter or stop a threat before it happens, right? So here, good examples would be security, physical security controls, processes, IT solutions, change management. Last class, we talked about employee training, access control policies, firewalls. Those are the examples of preventive controls. Now let's talk about detective controls. Detective controls are designed to identify and detect incident or breach that have already occurred. This control can help in early detection, allowing for timely response and mitigation. And here you can see examples are intrusion detection systems, security information and event management systems, security audit, log monitoring, honeypots, continuous monitoring. Those are good detective controls. Finally, when it comes to corrective controls, those are the measures taken to remedy the effect of an incident or breach and restore system to its normal functioning. They're really focusing on fixing the root cause of the problem and preventing similar problems from happening within the organization in the future. Patch management would be an example of corrective control. Data recovery and backup procedures, incidents response plans. Here you can see we have computer incident response team and chief information security officer. Now let's look at those controls in more details. So right here we have physical security, access controls. Once again, those are preventive controls. What can we do? One of the most important and basic things that the company can do is physically securing access controls. Those are absolutely essential steps that the company should take. A skilled attacker can gain physical access to IS and obtain sensitive data within a shorter period of time, I would say. So we can limit entry to building, restrict access to networks and data. Right? When it comes to man-trap, man-trap is a use of specially designed rooms that serve as an entryway to the data center. Typically contains two doors. Each uses multiple authentication methods to control access. And you've probably seen those man traps in the movies, in spy movies, where you have to, it's usually white. You go through the room, looks like a corridor, and you have to use the authentication method to enter. First door, walk through, and then use another authentication method to get to or to get through the next door. Right, laptop theft. Right, we want to make sure that we secure, right, physically secure laptops, right, because laptop threat is a huge problem, and it is a problem not only because of the cost to replace it, but really loss of confidential information. So we want to train our employees to make sure that we keep our assets safe. Now let's talk about user access controls, authentication, and authorization. What is the difference? Authentication verifies the identity of a person or device that is attempting to access the AIS system. So a lot of times, if we're talking about the person, this person will know something like PIN or password. The person will have something like smart card or ID badge, and have some biometric characteristics. So those are biometric identifiers, fingerprints or voice recognition, something like that, right? So depending on the importance of this area, right, that we can do a combination of different things. We can do whether one or two of those authentication, use one of those authentication methods, or use all three of them at the same time if this is a very sensitive area and we really want to secure it. Authorization determines what a person can access. So a lot of times companies will have access control matrix. This is a table specifying which portion of the AIS users are permitted to access and what actions they can perform. Read, modify, view. When an employee attempts to access AIS, the system performs a comparability test that matches the user's authentication credentials against the access control matrix. Right? And once again, I'll go back to the movies. Sometimes you watch those spy movies or superhero movies where Nick Fury is going to go into the system and it says access denied, right? Because he might not have that level of clearance, right? So once again, this is comparability test where it uses authentication credentials against the access control matrix. Okay, so right here you have authentication and authorization. I'm going to talk about passwords, right? Passwords are very important, and keep your passwords or setting up good passwords is very important. 8 characters or more would be recommended, right? So we want to make sure we use multiple character types. It could be alphabetic, numeric, special characters, etc. And I would suggest that do not use any dictionary words. Also important aspect, do not share this or write it down somewhere on the sticky note, right? So that's those are big no's. But let's move on and look at IT solutions. So IT solutions, right? We talked about malware. It's a major threat that can damage information systems and provide a means for unauthorized access. So within COVID framework, COVID recommends that companies really perform malware awareness educations. They install anti-malware protection tools or devices, complete all of the recommended patches to the software, review new malware threats because new ones might be coming up. Important aspect of COVID recommendations is filtering incoming traffic, and then we go back to training. We want to make sure that we train our employees properly and explain the danger of malware. Okay. Next is network access controls, right? Border router connects company's information system to the internet. Behind the border router is the main firewall that prevents outsiders from tapping into AIS system. So companies' web server and email server are placed in a separate network, usually called demilitarized zone. Transmission control protocols specify the procedures for giving files or dividing files and documents into packets to be sent over internet, and the methods for reassembling those documents. Internet protocol specifies the structure of those packets and how to route them to the proper destinations. IP packets usually consist of two parts, a header and a body. The header contains the packet's origin and destination address. The router reads the destination address and decides where to send or route the packet next. Access control list is going to determine which packets are allowed to enter the system and which should be dropped. Okay, so that's a very important aspect of network access controls. In terms of device and software hardening controls, right? Hardening is the process of turning off unnecessary features or programs that could present potential threats. So everything that is not being used should be turned on. Encryption is a final layer of defense to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive information. And I will have you watch a video on encryption. All right, so what are the detecting steps, right? Well, we talked about log analysis and intrusion detection system. Log analysis is when IT employee or software examine logs to identify any evidence of possible attacks or any evidence of possible intruders. But once again, if you have someone who is really good breaking into the system, they most likely will try to cover their tracks. So, just keep that in mind. Intrusion detection system is the system that creates logs of network traffic that was permitted to pass the firewall and then analyze those logs for signs of attempted or successful intrusions. So those systems are very helpful as they help to identify any attempts or any intrusion. Okay. Let's move on and talk about honeypots. Honeypots are a decoy system that is set up somewhere within information systems, and it really provides an early warning that an insider or an outsider are attempting to search for confidential information, right? So they get to this decoy system and start looking at different documents, maybe copying it, and so on. So that could be an alarm for IT specialists to kind of identify that the company is under attack. Continuous monitoring is always very important because we want to make sure that employees are compliant with organization information security policies and overall performance of business. So that continuous monitoring, we always monitor, we always evaluate and adjust as we need to. Okay, so responding to attack. Here I have two controls related to response, right? Computer incident response team. And this team is responsible for dealing with attacks and should do several steps. One of the first step is recognizing that the problem exists. Then they want to make sure that they contain the problem, recover, and follow up to fix this problem and prevent further things happening to the organization. In terms of Chief Information Security Officer, this is a very important senior management position. In the last couple of years, we realized that security, or a lot of companies realized that security is a very important foundation for everything else within the organization, right? So security, Chief Information Security Officer is a big position, and this senior manager is focusing on security. Okay, so in terms of monitoring and revising security solutions, we want to do penetration tests, and that's when organization would hire a consultant, maybe white hat hacker, who can come in and attempt to break into the organization's information system, but do it with the authorization from the company. And then this individual will identify any issues, how long did it take, and so on. Right? So based on this penetration test, the company will have to revise their security solutions. Change control and change management is a formal process used to ensure that modification to hardware, software, or processes do not reduce system reliability, right? Anything that we do, we still want to make sure that we maintain high level of reliability, right? Here, when we change something within the system, we want to make sure that we document a request, first of all, for this change, identify the nature of this change, and maybe date and outcome of this request. We want to make sure that we maintain documents with approvals of the change by management, maybe a couple employees, depending on how large is the change. We want to make sure that we test the changes in a separate system called test environment first, and This is done to make sure that everything is working properly before we can migrate this change into the overall system. So conversion controls to ensure data are accurately and completely transferred from old to new system, also important. And any updates to documentation that reflect new things that are implemented have to be kept. So system description, procedures, manuals, and so on have to be updated. Okay. So that's it. Please absorb and think about those controls: preventive, detective, and corrective controls. Have a nice day.